I really want to thank everyone for joining us today. Just as opening remarks, before we jump into the presentations, I wanted to kick off with some remarks about the Sustainable Cities Network. And so as many of you probably already know, the Sustainable Cities Network is an education and outreach program of Wrigley, Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability, and the Global Futures Laboratory. And so it started as a free voluntary network that brings together local city, town, county, and tribal community practitioners to share best practices and interface with ASU sustainability researchers and students. And one of the way we do that is through our work groups, which are primarily driven by the communities that focus on specific topics such as extreme heat, electric vehicles, solar energy, and federal infrastructure. And so we launched this federal infrastructure work group last month. So thank you for joining us for the second meeting. This work group comes off a series of workshops that were hosted last year to identify collaborations for funding as a result of some of the infrastructure money coming down to the communities. And so I want to go ahead and introduce our Federal Infrastructure Work Group Chair, Braden K, as well as SCN's Graduate Student Assistant, Chandler Escalante, who has been working with SCN the past couple of months to conduct research on regional resilience. So I'll pass over to Chandler to share more about the work group and its background, and also introduce some of our key stakeholders for today.
Thanks for that great introduction, Allison. Hello, everybody. My name is Chandler Escalante, Master of Science in Global Technology and Development student here at ASU, and Ann Richmond's Graduate Service Assistant for the Sustainable Cities Network. Unfortunately, Ann was unable to attend today's meeting, but she, Braden, and Allison will be leading these meetings. So we can go ahead and move forward with the introduction to the Federal Infrastructure Work Group. So my position with the Sustainable Cities Network began in August of last year, and Ann and I noted that there existed a need for increased collaboration between community-based organizations, local governments, academia, and the private sector to take advantage of the funding that would be coming in from the federal government, especially when it comes to the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, the IIJA. So the purpose of the Federal Infrastructure Work Group is to encourage our local communities and organizations around Maricopa County to improve the channels of communication in order to collaborate and coordinate on acquiring this federal funding that has been made available, especially for projects and infrastructure related to supporting climate equity, sustainability, and resilience. The goals of this work group are to prepare our cities in Maricopa County for federal funding opportunities. We're not just trying to prepare the big hitters in terms of Phoenix, Scottsdale, Mesa, Tempe. We're also trying to encourage the smaller towns and rural towns around Maricopa County to work together with these big hitters in order to be able to secure funding for everyone. We want to be able to use this funding to meet community and regional needs, specifically related to supporting regional climate and sustainability efforts. The main focus of this work group is not just to share best practices, but also to put pen to paper to work together in future work groups. These first couple of meetings are going to be primarily related to various different presentations that we are going to be having facilitated here within the Federal Infrastructure Work Group. But Braden and I have spoken and agreed that we would like to have the focus of this work group change after a couple of months, after we've heard from some of our community stakeholders, towards what can we do together? What can actually be done? This is a little bit difficult to do over Zoom. So Alice and I have spoken about potentially having a couple of future meetings actually be in person. We'll do our best to have these meetings be scheduled, these in-person meetings be scheduled a couple months ahead of time in order to be able to make sure that as many of you can attend as possible. But we would also like to make sure that we're able to connect cities and organizations with ASU-led grant opportunities as well. like I said, we are trying to share best practices in creating equity-centered grant applications, but we also want to make sure that we are getting everyone working together in order to increase the number of federal grant applications and awards to our region. So I was fortunate enough to be able to be put in contact with various different community stakeholders around the Valley, and I would like to introduce a few of them to you all. They will be presenting in future work group meetings. And so I would like to go ahead and introduce Maren Mahoney, Stephen Olmsted, and Liliana Cardenas to the group. I have spoken with each of these stakeholders, and they are all prepared to give just a brief 2 to 3 minute introduction to their work. And then during our federal infrastructure work group meeting on April 5th, they will be expanding upon this brief intro. So Maren, would you and your team like to begin?
Hi, yes, thanks, Chandler. Absolutely. Good morning, everybody. In addition to myself from my office, we also have our Will Green and Blaze Caudell joining us. I'll have them, if it's okay, I'd like to have them introduce themselves really briefly as well. So a little bit about me. So I'm the director of the new Governor's Office of Resiliency under Governor Hobbs. This is an office that includes the State Energy Office, a revamped version of the State Energy Office, but it also takes a look at natural resources and impacts and quality of life in a more holistic way. So we have land and water also within our department. So there's a lot going on in the state of Arizona in terms of land, water, and energy. So we have a few policy advisors on board, and that's Blaze and Will here today. And we also have a water policy advisor that's unable to do it, to attend right now. But a little bit of the office, it's a brand new office. Some of my team just joined on Monday. We are very excited to get to work on the IL and the IRA funding opportunities for the state. I'm very, very grateful to the Sustainable Cities Network and this particular working group for the work you've already done on that. It's really wonderful to see that, there's all of this leadership happening all throughout the state. And I can just give you a real brief intro about myself. I'm an attorney. I actually graduated from ASU and the School of Sustainability with a master's degree. I was in one of the first classes. So it was a bit of a program at the time. It's wonderful to see how it's grown. And then I worked 8 years on energy policy, and with the Sustainable Cities Network years, and it's just really wonderful to be able to have that resource. And so very happy to be a part of this. And I will put my email and my phone number into the chat, and I want to be as open and have as much communication as possible. I'll just I'll hand the mic over to Will from my team so he can introduce himself briefly. I apologize for the internet connection. It's a little iffy today for some reason.
Yeah. Hey everybody, this is Will Green. Hopefully you all can hear me. Maybe Allison can give me, or Maren, a thumbs up. But so I'm a policy advisor in the Governor's Office of Resiliency and focus on the land portfolio, like Maren mentioned, which will be natural resources. I previously was Commissioner Kennedy's policy advisor at the Corporation Commission. I also attended the School of Sustainability and at ASU and ended up had a degree in business and sustainability, and then got a master's in real estate development also from ASU. I'm very passionate about the intersection of urban land use policy and climate action and land use policy overall. Previously, I worked with Sierra Club and renewable energy developers, and excited to be a part of this.
Hi everyone, this is Blaze. Sorry, I'm currently in transit. I just left a meeting and heading back into the office now. So great to be here. I just started on Monday as the Energy Policy Advisor within the Office of Resiliency, and just absolutely thrilled and so excited to be on the team, especially with such fantastic people. So truly all around so thankful. I come from the energy world, so I very much absolutely love energy and just the diversity that we have in the energy world. And I'm excited to be able to bring that expertise here. Prior to that, I also served at a local city. So I was in the city of Mesa, serving as the chief of staff to a council member there for about 3.5, 4 years. And so I bring a lot of kind of that local government as well as energy perspective to the table, and I'm really excited to be here. As an aside, I in my previous meeting just before this, had mentioned the Sustainable Cities Network, and I will tell you the person I was meeting with absolutely loved the work that you all do and is just absolutely thrilled by the work that's happening here. So kudos to you all. I'm very excited and thankful to be here. Thank you.
All righty, great. Thanks so much for everyone at Governor Hobbs' Office of Resilience for that fantastic introduction. Very excited to hear more about what you guys will be working on as the administration moves forward. Stephen, I believe I saw you enter the group. Would you mind giving a brief introduction to yourself and your work with ADOT?
Sure. Thanks, Chandler, and good luck with your next chapter, I'm assuming. So congratulations on finishing this chapter. So my name's Steve Olmsted. I work with the Arizona Department of Transportation. I've been there for almost 15 years. And I helped build a couple different programs that I think are relative to this effort. I go back with Ann probably a decade, at least, on some of these topics. And I think we're one of the early state DOTs in the nation to kind of establish a sustainable transportation program. And then that kind of led into a dedicated resilience program. And then we have some other things from there that are really applicable. So we've kind of been at sustainability and resilience and total systems thinking on managing, natural hazard, extreme weather, and climate adaptation for more than a decade now. So ADOT has almost a $1.5 billion annual construction program. So one of the biggest things for years was finding ways to, in a very traditional road building environment, gently ease in, and we'll just look at it from an overarching standpoint, really looking at environmental risk, blending the natural and built environments into these very traditional road building dynamics. No harm was done with the American Rescue Plan, the IIJA, as you guys referenced, even the Inflation Reduction Act, really probably simultaneously accelerated a lot of the things that we have been chipping away at. Multiple universities around the country, but I'll speak to the three in Arizona, the three public universities, have really been partners of mine and at ADOT to work with a lot of things, large climate model data sets, developing, risk models and things like that to help us better put natural hazard and extreme weather and climate into perspective. So we're excited to participate. The IIJA, as you referenced, and then I mentioned some of the programs that have accelerated, and that's, better incorporating climate modeling, into, heavy civil infrastructure development. We work on efforts for, putting into context construction water use, especially here in Arizona. Carbon reduction is another big element. So we have a carbon reduction program that we started last year and the such. So a lot of great things happening, all of which you guys are very aware of. And yeah, we're in an environment, at least at ADOT, that's been really conducive to these things. And really because of that, have been put in a situation where the agency is kind of garnered a national leadership role with AASHTO and US DOT, Federal Highways, National Academies of Science, and groups like that. So it's been a great collaborative as we've progressed. And I'll single out ASU working with some of the Fulton School of Engineering folks and the School of Sustainability have really helped integrate a lot of knowledge-based decision making that's been a real advantage for us. But it's nice to meet everyone, and appreciate being here.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Well, we look forward to hearing more about your work with the Department of Transportation in the upcoming meeting next month in April. Liliana, are you here?
Yep, I'm right here. Thank you for the invite. Let me just, so good morning, everybody. My name is Liliana Cardenas, and I'm with Maricopa County Department of Public Health. I'm new to this world, so to speak, of, officially, but I'm really excited to be here. I've worked for the Public Health Department here now going on almost 9 years, and I oversee a lot of macro level countywide programs, so such as the community health needs assessment, a lot of our public health liaisons, the regionalization of the county, so very large scale. So one of the things that recently we were able to leverage, because we received funding through our CDC Health Disparities Fund, is to create a climate and health focus. And so this allows us, many of you have worked with Viosa, with Aaron, and some of our folks in our EPI department around energy and security, heat mitigation, mortality due to heat, and all of that stuff. And so we really wanted to take the opportunity to grow that work, to move it beyond just the EPI and the data collection piece, but to move it really into a space of more action. So we created a new program, and so that will be that climate and health. And as I mentioned, it is funded through our CDC Health Disparities Grant, but it has been built into our infrastructure grant. So it'll continue on, and we're hoping to really be able to build it up. Right now, we only have one staff, and that staff is actually going to join us March 13th. And so we're really excited to welcome them. Many of you may know this person. It's Jessica Bell. She actually worked with us several years ago when a lot of this work started in the health department, and she helped us develop a lot of the initial pieces and worked with our EPI team. So she went to state, and now she's coming back to help lead this work. Just in the side note, we're also applying to hopefully get a CDC Public Health Associate to help with this work as well. We know it's a heavy lift. We know there's so much to do that what we want to do. So we're really hoping we'll get some more assistance. Some of our priority areas are obviously participating in meetings like this, participating in existing coalitions, continuing to collect data, and working with a lot of our healthcare partners to get that data, and also potentially do a heat mortality review board and a lot of these things. Continue to address heat mitigation and emergency preparedness, especially with a lot of our focus within the health department. We do want to revamp, I would say, actually just do another building climate, bridging climate health and public health strategic plan for the county. The one that was originally written, I think already, it's been years since it kind of expired. So we really want to, I always joke, want to get the band back together and start working on that and start building that strategic plan and really lay out some strong actionable plans and items so we can work together. In addition, we really want this, like, as I mentioned, to be the first step. So I've been meeting with a lot of folks while we onboard this new staff. So I'm really excited that you all have been so welcoming and given me so much information. So our goal is really to grow this team over time. We are in the process. We are going to be applying to one of the EPA grants, the Environmental Justice Government to Government grant. And so we are hoping we will get an NOI, and that's just a notice of interest, out either the end of this week or early next week, because we're going to need to work with partners to do this. And that's really going to just help support the work that we're trying to do to get this up and running and build up that strategic plan, and maybe put some projects and funding into the community to support the work. So that's where we're at. I mean, again, it's pretty new. We're really excited. So I would just say I'll put my email in the chat. Please let me know if there's any meetings or any groups or any people that you want us to connect with, any reports, any material that you want us to make sure that we review and see. All of that's valuable information to get our person and our team up and running. So I appreciate it.
Great. Thanks so much, Liliana. I appreciate it. So now we are going to go ahead and move into some more information about the relation between Sustainable City Networks work groups and the creation of the Federal Infrastructure Work Group and the funding buckets that we are going to be focusing and highlighting with the Federal Infrastructure Work Group. And with that, I'll go ahead and hand it on over to the Director of Sustainability and Resilience for the City of Tempe, Braden Kay.
Thanks, Chandler, and thanks, Allison. And a huge thank you to our three sort of featured invited guests, to Marin and Will and Blaze. You know, their office eventually, as it gets up and running and mature, is going to be able to help us bring in Department of Energy dollars and help coordinate a lot of grant efforts across the state. So we wanted to make sure that you met them as soon as possible. And as they get up and running, they're going to play a really important coordinating and support effort. And then I'll talk a little bit in a minute about why Steve is so good at his job and why the work at ADOT is kind of foundational to some of the federal grants that we can be going after next. And then, you know, a lot of this work, if there's cities out there that feel like they can't apply to alone, there's always partnerships. And it's so great that County Public Health is willing to be a partner on these upcoming environmental justice grants. First one's due in April. They're going to apply, but it's going to be, there'll be several years of that grant. And so there'll be a lot of opportunities to partner with community-based organizations and County Public Health on upcoming EJ grants. And we've had great championing from ASU CC, who's on the call, who's really been helping foster relationships between the environmental justice the group at EPA that's working on this, and making sure the EPA is aware of the opportunities that exist to invest in that work in Maricopa County. So in terms of Sustainable Cities Network, we have existing working groups, and those existing working groups are keeping an eye on key federal funding areas. So our hope is that the EV work sub-work group is going to continue to keep an eye on electric vehicle grants. Much of that is formula funding, but some of that will be competitive funding that we'll be able to bring to the state of Arizona. The Climate and Resilience group, we hope will continue to stay in touch with Rio Reimagined and the Knowledge Stage for Resilience, so that when the urban forestry and ecosystems restoration grants come out of the Department of Interior, that we're able to go after those. The City of Phoenix has done incredible leadership work on cool pavement and healthy streets work and cool corridors. So our hope is they will lead a grant that they involve more cities in for the Healthy Streets Initiative coming out of the Department of Transportation. And Steve, maybe there's an opportunity for some state collaboration with ADOT on that grant. So that Healthy Streets grant hasn't come out yet, but that will be a great opportunity there. And we just received notification on Friday that the Department of Energy has given us the okay to move forward with a full application for their Resilient Energy Code grant. So we have about 9 Arizona cities and 3 New Mexico cities that have signed up for a 4-year, $5 million grant application that is going to be due at the end of this month, at the end of March. So if you are interested in any of these 3 grants and being involved, just put the name of the grant. So put ecosystems restoration, electric vehicles, healthy streets. We'll make sure you get put on an email listserv for those particular grant opportunities. Many of you are already in the building codes group, so that's really exciting. So this is sort of a different articulation. There's a few other groups. So I did mention electric vehicles already. We already have the heat relief working group that meets every month during the winter and twice a month during the summer, and a lot of stakeholders that come together, both cities and community-based organizations. So there will be some grant opportunities, including the EJ funding from EPA and the BRIC funding from FEMA that this heat relief group can go after. I did mention urban forestry and green stormwater infrastructure, though that is a existing subgroup at Sustainable Cities Network. There'll be an opportunity for us to continue to go after that funding with that group. And then it's not an SCN group, but County Public Health and Emma Vera from Unlimited Potential have a monthly call on energy insecurity and housing. There will be some DOE money that's available for that work. So we're going to continue to make sure that that monthly working group has access to apply for funds for that work as well. Next, as part of some grant money that we got from the Vitalist Foundation, they are helping us get organized on 4 grant opportunities, and we're going to be doing a grant workshop in April around these 4 grant opportunities. So I'll briefly go over them, and then we're going to head it over to Larry, who's going to talk to us about the City of Phoenix's approach to federal grants, and hopefully shed some light on their experience with the FEMA BRIC program. So this is a pocket of money. It has to go through the state. So the Department of basically an application has to go from either multiple cities or a single city to the state emergency management office, and then they have to flow that money request up through FEMA. This is a great program. There's a lot of money. It's for building stuff. This is not, there's some of these other grants are for planning. This is like infrastructure, and Larry can get into the details of his experience, of Phoenix's experience with the BRIC program. You've heard it mentioned a few times. The EPA has the environmental justice grants. There's a variety of different kinds. Some are specifically for cities, some are specifically for nonprofits and community-based organizations to go after. The first round is due in April, so it's quick turnaround time. If you're interested in potentially joining county public health collaboration, let us know in the chat. We'll get you linked up to Liliana. She's doing a notice of intent where basically cities and community-based organizations submit their interest to the county before the county submits their final proposal to the EPA, and then Liliana will be able to talk more about that next month. But it'll be too late for you to get involved next month. So if you want to be involved, please let us know so we can link you up with Liliana. Next slide. We also have, this is the one that Steve is here for. Really excited about this opportunity, and Steve can help us talk about this opportunity more next month. But there is an awesome resilient infrastructure program out of the Department of Transportation called the PROTECT program. And there's a set aside that a certain amount of that money needs to be spent on resilient infrastructure planning and resilience planning. So this is the first time Steve's hearing me say this, but we believe that this money, which will go directly to ADOT, is an opportunity for Steve to take the work that he's done statewide and take some of that kind of planning expertise and planning work and help connect it to cities and counties. So if you want to understand what your heat vulnerability or your flood vulnerability to your transportation and road system is, Steve has done some of that work at a high level. There might be an opportunity to use some of this funding to downscale it to Queen Creek or downscale it to Coconino County or to Pima County or obviously to Maricopa County as well. Steve, anything you want to say about PROTECT while you're here?
Sure. Yeah, it's a kind of a game changer, and I can, I'll do an overall presentation, but yeah, absolutely for the benefit of those that can get mired down in the labyrinth of attempting to access federal formula and discretionary funding. I can hopefully simplify that. So, and your comments are right on. It's available in each of the next 5 years, at least through the this particular infrastructure law, and the pass-through is correct. So I'll bring some slides next time that'll kind of break down some of that reality. And I will note, which I'll have to double check on, but there's a double benefit actually with the PROTECT, because The Protect is currently in place with the formula funding, and that is underway in the current year. The nugget is that there is just south of 2 billion identified in the infrastructure law, the BIL, for discretionary funding. And that notice of funding, which is kind of the first trigger that the federal government will issue to alert entities that there's available funding to access, has not been issued yet on the discretionary. Those are basically grant for those that are more familiar with that word. So I can present a little bit on that too, but there is a kind of that double benefit of both formula and discretionary in Protect. But yeah, thanks a lot.
Oh, awesome, Steve. Thank you so much. So yeah, very exciting. Next month, you'll get a deeper dive on this, but I'm so glad there's interest from Queen Creek. I do believe that this funding is excellent funding for cities that are newer to this space. I will say ADOT did this work under Governor Ducey. And so there's no question that this kind of work doesn't have to be partisan at all. It can be bread and butter. Do climate impacts such as flooding and extreme heat harm your infrastructure? And how do you make sure you're prepared for that? How do you understand the nature of those potential risks? That's very bread and butter work. Doesn't need to be partisan. It's happened in Arizona in a very nonpartisan way. And so even if your city councils or jurisdictions are more conservative, this Protect funding is sort of a very easy entry point into doing starting to do climate work. So Steve, really excited to hear what you have to say next month. And we have now 5 years of funding, both on the formula side and on the discretionary side, to help communities. So it's a game changer. I agree with you. And then lastly, there's going to continue to be awesome opportunities out of the Department of Energy. Our consultant Shalini is really interested in some opportunities around irrigation modernization and some funding that could be used for sort of the agriculture, water, energy nexus. There's also some irrigation modernization funding out of the Department of Reclamation in the Department of Interior. So she's going to be shedding some light on with us on that. If there's cities interested in that, please let us know about that as well. So without further ado, I want to get to our local hero, Larry Smallwood, who's the implementation manager for federal infrastructure. And we're here to listen to what Larry's been doing in Phoenix, learn from Phoenix, and then hopefully think about how the lessons from Phoenix can help impact as we try as a region and as a state to go after more of these federal funds. So Larry's just been an incredible mentor to me and other cities, and just really appreciate you being here today, Larry.
All right, so good morning, everyone. I was asked to provide an overview of Phoenix's experience with the grant submittal process for the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program. And since both this program and the Flood Mitigation Assistance program fall under FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Assistance umbrella, and the grants are opened in tandem, I've included information on both programs. Throughout the presentation, you'll hear from me, and I'll refer to the programs as BRIC and FMA, because as most of you know, working with infrastructure, we love acronyms. My hope is that we can be quick and concise in going through the presentations, and then I can kind of leave time for questions from the group. In particular, there are three major areas of focus I've highlighted, and that's the review of the programs, the general application process, and a very high-level overview of the process the City of Phoenix uses to identify and submit applications. So this slide here, I'll first start by providing a quick review of the two programs, which will include a high-level summary, sub-applicant requirements, and I'll wrap up with the funding details. So starting with the program overview, for the two programs, I'll start off by saying that both opportunities are open to states, local governments, tribes, and territories. BRIC in particular is designed to assist these communities as they undertake hazard mitigation projects, reducing the risks they face from disasters and natural hazards. It aims to accomplish this by categorically shifting the federal focus away from reactive disaster spending and towards research-supported, proactive investment in community resilience. Flood mitigation assistance, or FMA, on the other hand, as you might expect, is more narrowly focused on flood mitigation, and it aims to reduce or eliminate the risk of repetitive flood damage to buildings insured by the National Flood Insurance Program. You'll notice here that I've listed these as sub-applicant requirements. And the reason for this is that for both of these programs, our state agency, the Department of Emergency and Military Affairs, or DEMA, is the required applicant, and any local communities throughout the state participate as sub-applicants through DEMA. 3 of the major requirements for sub-applicants are listed here. I believe many of you on this meeting are from communities who have FEMA approved hazard mitigation plans and participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. For those of you who have not performed a benefit cost analysis, the White House has strongly encouraged federal agencies to provide technical assistance as part of their efforts tied to the bipartisan infrastructure law. And there are a number of resources that each of those agencies have provided to assist in that area. In addition to these resources, DEMA has a number of templates they were able to provide throughout the application process. And I can't speak highly enough of the collaboration and dedication shown by staff on their small but mighty team throughout the federal fiscal year 22 application process. The next point of distinction is a minor one, but worth noting. Both BRIC and FMA are primarily discretionary funds, meaning those are funds that you have to compete for nationally. But BRIC does have one small formula funding component. And as you'll see on the next slide, for BRIC, the state of Arizona formula funding for that program is a small allocation relative to the competitive funding dollars that it could administer through the competitive process to local communities. It is important to consider that though this funding pool is significantly smaller, you are only competing with your peers throughout the state rather than the entire US. Here we have the money slide. I've included the finer details on the slide itself for BRIC, and I would like to highlight the national competition amounts of $2.133 billion and the individual application cap of $50 million per sub-applicant. It's important to note that this is per sub-applicant, not applicant, meaning DEMA can submit an application well above the dollar amount, which is also important because there was no cap on the number of sub-applications a community could submit. FMA is very similar, but as you'll notice, a smaller overall pool of funding with $800 million nationally, and without the specific set-asides contained with BRIC that you see for state territory allocations of $112 million, tribal set-aside of $50 million, and then I've noted in there the $2 million formula cap as well of $2 million. For the general application process, for the 2 grants, the 3 major steps are listed here, starting with reading the notice of funding opportunity. And I can't stress this component enough for all grant applications. And I know it sounds very rudimentary, but the NOFOs really are your guidebook for all things related to the application. Even just one overlooked requirement can knock you out of the review process for highly competitive funds. So as you're going through the process, start there. Determine the eligible projects that the federal agency lists as eligible projects. And if you can do any digging, make a determination on what their award priorities are. Sometimes that is more explicitly listed in the notice of funding opportunity. Other times you can pick up those pieces of details through webinars or publications and supplemental information that you'll see come out from those agencies, or even connecting with your federal delegation. The next step that I would recommend is contacting and coordinating with the applicant, which is, in this case, our state agency DEMA, to obtain sub-applicant instructions. 4 pieces of deadlines that they provided to us this year that I can't speak to whether or not those will be the same setup last year, but, next year, but that was what we went through over the past few months. And that was first submitting the notices of intent to the applicant. So for that process, we essentially put together our list of projects, provided very high-level overview and details and project amounts, provided that to DEMA for review. And then the second step was receiving an initial ranking and initial feedback from the applicant. And for that, DEMA basically came back to us, provided minor comments on our application, told us whether or not we could proceed and move forward with those. And at that time, they provided us a few little minor details about things that we could improve upon or add to the application to make it more highly successful. So the third step was then to submit a draft sub-application. So this is where you start to fill in the more full details of the project. It doesn't have to be complete at this point, but the more detail that you can put in there and provide at that time, the more detail that DEMA can review and provide you feedback on. So I really do suggest that as you're going through this process, when they give the sub-applicant deadline for the drafts, get as much complete as you can. Treat it as an official deadline and try to have everything done at that time. Now, you don't necessarily need to, if you're working with consultants, move all the deadlines forward and try and expedite and incur additional charges, but you really do want to have a complete project so that way they can give you all of the insight that they're receiving from FEMA at that time as well. The next step is to resubmit the revised sub-application to the applicant for compilation and submittal to the federal agency. Because as I mentioned before, DEMA is the applicant, so they have a process that they use through FEMA's application, which is FEMA Go, and you package all of your sub-applications through there, and then they basically compile that on the back end and create one single application. And they have to have enough time to go through and review that, make sure that there's no errors in the system, which from what I understand in the past, FEMA Go has been less than reliable. So we took the approach of trying to be early and just really pushing all of our information in there early and often and checking in with DEMA to make sure that everything was okay. So then moving to the next slide, this is our overview of the City of Phoenix's process. So this is something that we do not just for BRIC, but we do it for other BIL or Inflation Reduction Act grant applications. The first thing that we do is the most basic, and that's just analyzing the NOFOs. So as we see those, and we see them from a number of different sources and streams of information, some of that's from grants.gov, some of that's from our federal consultant. Some of the agencies even directly send those notifications out, but it's just important to keep on top of those. Every day that those things are out there is in that you are not aware of them are days lost for your staff or for consultants or for any of the work that goes into completing those applications. So you just really want to stay on top of that, do an initial cursory overview, and then from that, we convene our interdepartmental stakeholders. So as we go through the grant applications, I try to get a good understanding of what types of projects can fit in there and which departments we have that could fit into those overall program parameters. So after we meet with them, we start to determine what projects are on the table. And if it is a situation where there are a limited number of applications, unlike BRIC, where we were allowed to submit an unlimited amount, you start going through and we compare the eligibility criterion to our strategic priorities and our public/political input. For us, we get that information from a number of sources. Most recently, we just went through our bond process, so we had a lot of input on a number of areas that the public was requesting infrastructure. Our elected officials play an integral role in that as well. And then from that, that's where we start to identify and hone down the projects. And we have to be selective about that. So we then move into a review and selection process where we determine which projects to greenlight for the application. From that point, it's important to just periodically check in and support staff throughout the application process, determine if they are facing any hurdles, obstacles, information gaps from the federal agencies, anything that we can determine at that point. And you also want to make sure that as you're doing that, some of the support that you're providing is providing political support as well. So that's reaching out to your federal delegation, your peer agencies, and any partners that you might have working with on this project. And then from our standpoint, we make sure to provide bi-weekly citywide updates until application submission. So we convene every other Friday, and during that process, it's really important that we share information with our various departments and our city manager's office to make sure that any lessons learned are shared with the group and that we have that feedback as we're going through, because there might be particular departments that are working on an application for this program in FY22, but it might be an entire different group of departments working on it in FY23. So any lessons learned and information that we can share throughout that process really benefits the whole group. And as you know, a lot of the process for grant applications is similar. So even if it's a different program that somebody's working on, they know, hey, DEMA has this template that they're using for this, or DOT has this new BCA template that they're offering. And that really helps you know where to find the tools and what the agencies are preferring for that moment in time. So the next piece I have is a summary of the City of Phoenix's applications for BRIC and FEMA. You'll notice we went full bore on this one, and we have 10 total applications. 8 of them are for BRIC, 2 for FMA, and for BRIC we had 7 that fit into the national competition category, and that's the one with the $50 million cap per sub application. And we had 1 that fit in our statewide competition. So we only had 1 that was under that $2 million threshold. For the FMA grants, 2 of those were identical to our BRIC stormwater projects. And the reason that I wanted to highlight both of those programs is for this process, DEMA and FEMA really do make it easy. If there are programs that are projects that are eligible for both programs, you can really just go through and duplicate your applications to some extent. On the FEMA Go website, you do have to manually fill out most of that information again, but it's a lot of the same information, and you really aren't having to rework and treat it as 2 completely separate applications. And during the initial process, you really are just submitting 1 document, and then you're checking a box saying, I'm interested in both BRIC and flood mitigation assistance when DEMA is doing their initial ranking of the sub applications. So the first one, and this is the one that we had for the statewide competition for those $2 million in formula funds that offered through DEMA, and that is our Urban Heat Leadership Academy. So that one has a estimated project cost of $450,000. What we were looking to do was build a capacity with Phoenix residents to participate in hazard planning and implementation, and advocate for hazard mitigation activities that protect public health. This is one that we are very excited about, and we feel pretty confident about based on some of the initial feedback from DEMA, based on what FEMA's priorities were. They think that they are finally shifting a little bit to take more notice of heat as a matter of concern. I know that a lot of the federal agencies have a little bit of that East Coast bias, where people are very versed in the effects of cold weather and climate on residents, but it is just now shifting to see that priority as far as hazard mitigation funding going towards heat. And so this is one that we're really keeping an eye on. Our next one is our Westwood storm drain, which this fits into our BRIC and flood mitigation assistance categories. It's 1 project for the 2 sub applications. The estimated project cost is $7.8 million. And what we're looking to do is construct a 10-year storm drain along 21st Avenue from Hazelwood to South Turney Avenue, which would convey east to a new detention basin at 20th and Turney Avenues. And then on the water services side, we have 3 different projects. So I included these in 1 slide. It's very similar in nature. It's just 3 different sub applications. So we have similar projects for both water treatment plants and booster pump stations. So the aggregate cost of these 3 applications is $86.7 million, which, as you can see, would have been over that $50 million cap. So you would have to break it into separate applications. And what we're intending to do is design an installation of, for the water treatment plants, about 30 megawatts of standby generators to power 2 plants and finished water pumping stations during outages, and then various standby generators for 12 booster pump stations, ranging in capacity from 3 to 135 million gallons per day. Next one is another stormwater project. It is the East Lafayette storm drain, which fits under both BRIC and FEMA again. Estimated project cost of 7.5 million. And what we're intending to do here is construct another large scale 10-year storm drain and catch basins along Lafayette Boulevard east of Arcadia Drive. And then another generator project here, which is our heat respite center emergency generators. The estimated project cost is 4.5 million. And what we are looking to do is provide for the design and installation of new emergency generators for 19 heat respite centers at libraries and community centers. These are locations that we provide for the community, that for those individuals who may be experiencing homelessness, that they can get out of the heat and utilize our facilities. But one risk factor that we're trying to mitigate for is we do not currently have backup power at these locations. So if we were to experience outages, these heat respite centers currently are of no use for us. So we're hoping that we can get some backup and kind of continue to build on those efforts that we've been providing for our community. And then our final project is the critical services power redundancy. It's another BRIC application of 4.5 million. This is design and installation of emergency generator life cycle replacements at 30 facilities. So many of these are public safety facilities, and these are just designed to provide backup power to critical building systems to support essential operations and services during outages. And these are ranging from anywhere from 30 to 250 kilowatts at each location. So with that, I have wrapped up the presentation and just wanted to open it up for questions if anybody has any.
Yeah, Larry, I'll get started while other Oh, sorry. So one would be, what did you learn? It feels like you all ended up having a lot of learning that happened here. And even if you didn't win the grants, that you all understood your vulnerabilities a lot closer. So I'm going to combine my conversation with Lisa's question. You know, how did this help spur critical conversations with your emergency management department and your facilities department? Like, and I have to imagine there are some things that even if you didn't get grant money for, maybe you'll find a way to fund it through CIP down the road eventually. And that all of this grant work really helped you all grow as an organization in terms of understanding some of your climate threats and potential solutions. Anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think anytime you're going through and kind of programmatically looking at things at this scale, there's opportunities to learn, and there's a lot of cross-pollination that occurs when you have different applicants or departments working on applications. In particular, this was kind of great timing for us as well, that this notice of funding opportunity came out very closely in tandem with our bond program. So we were really looking at scale for any of our sort of capital projects that we do not currently have that level of funding that we need. So we kind of went through that, and we went through and identified a significant amount of funding for the bond program. But as you all are experienced, there's always a few programs that get left out of that. So we had a good starting point there. But I wouldn't say that it necessarily uncovered projects that we weren't aware of as a whole, but it definitely helped some of the other departments realize areas that they could kind of partner and look for ways of reducing costs, identifying consultants, and looking at new approaches. So some of the projects started off kind of in one vein and maybe shifted a little bit as far as backup power was being looked at. But it's really just a continual process, and you kind of have to have a lot of these in the hopper early on. And that's one thing that we've been stressing with all of our departments, is to really look holistically at their capital needs and try and identify those things that either are programmed and that you could supplement with grant funding, or things that just aren't currently funded at all, being mindful of the fact that most of these grant programs do have local matches required. So you will have to come up with that funding during those time periods.
Yep. Oh, well, Larry, thank you so much. This was so insightful to see the way that your whole team, and with Mario's leadership at the deputy city manager level, and all of the work that you've been doing over the last few years. It's just really awesome to see. And we're going to be able to put together some regional applications for BRIC next fall, so we have a lot to learn from what Phoenix has done, and just really appreciate the city of Phoenix's leadership there. Allison, Chandler, you want to share the last slide? We know you all have to go. Before you run, if there's any grants you want to work on, put them in the chat. Make sure if you need to follow up with Larry, we can get you connected with him. If you need to follow up with the Arizona Office of Resiliency and Blaze and Will and Marin, they can be available as well. Marin put her email in the chat. What we wanted to make sure, if you have additional needs, if you need additional capacity, let us know. We'll make sure you get linked to appropriate folks. Next month, everyone who was an intro speaker today will be our main speakers next month. So we'll hear more about work we can do on environmental justice with Maricopa County Public Health. We'll hear more from Steve on how we can use Protect funding. And we will hear more from the State Office of Resiliency and the work that they're pursuing. There's some energy grants that will be coming potentially through their office that they'll be able to talk to us about more. So we're excited about that. So, yep, please put things in the chat. Really appreciate you all being here, and have a great rest of your day.